Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you are all well. It is Thursday. Is it Thursday? I don't even know. What day is it? What day is it? Yeah, it's Thursday. Look, you know, if you are, and I've said this before, if you're here just to know what date and time it is and the day, you're at the wrong place. But if you're here to be told that you look absolutely amazing, which you do, by the way, then you are at the right place. Look, we're going to talk about something today. Now, some of you may have seen the thumbnail of the video, and you'll know what we're going to be talking about. Some of you will have autoplay on, and you probably won't have a Scooby-Doo. But, look, we're going to talk about it. And I think it's about time that we spoke about it, because we get accused of it anyway. We get accused of going down rabbit holes. We get accused of being conspiracy theorists. And what I will say before we continue is that there is a little bit of a trigger warning. And this is going to be funny. This is going to be funny. And JB Gunner, this is especially for you. And you knew this was coming. Because some of the words that we're going to use today, we're going to soften down somewhat. We're going to soften down. And I know some of you don't like it, but ultimately we do it because YouTube, they want us to. Because if we don't, then they will demonetize or put limited ads on the videos. And we want to get paid because getting paid helps us do what we do, keep bringing content, sustain and maintain and upgrade the channel and improve the content. Before you cheeky fuckers say, we'll start improving the content then, Harsh, because this is becoming a little bit of a lame duck, mate, a little bit stagnant. Look, I'm getting there and there'll be more coming soon. But JB Gunner did do a video and he tried to point out the fact that we were not entirely honest. We was lying. And in fact, you could say pretty much whatever you want. And he proved it by doing a video when he would say a lot of naughty words and say things. The funny thing is, that video then got demonetized or limited ads. So, there you go. So we're going to be dumbing some of the stuff down. I don't do it for... Look, I'd happily talk about murders and all that sort of stuff and say it. It's not because I want to dumb it down purposefully. It's because we want to remain on the platform. And as much as I'd love to do this absolutely for free, that's just simply not possible. But look... So we're not necessarily going down rabbit holes, but what we're going to be doing today is touching on the Idaho 4 case and talking specifically about an issue that I've got in front of me here that you can't see and I can't share. But, well, I can share it. I will share it in a way. And we're going to be talking about Douglas Wilson. And why are we talking about Douglas Wilson? We're talking about Douglas Wilson because some of you will know who Douglas Wilson is, and as soon as I mention that name, your ears will prick up and you'll be like, here we go. But we talk about the Idaho 4 case, and a lot of people will turn around and say, look, this is cartel related. We think it's a cartel. We think that they've got involved. We think this was a drug house. We think that Kaylee Gonsalves was driving around in a Range Rover Evoque, which I've fucking got rid of, by the way, because they are shite. Yeah, people will use all these little things. They'll say that's what they were doing. And look, it's difficult for some people to... And what I will say is you can't be 100% sure that there is no cartel involvement. That's just not something that I support. It's not something that I see any evidence of. And when people are saying that Kaylee Gonsalves driving about in a old Range Rover Evoque is evidence of that, as I've shown by not being a narcotics dealer and previously before I had an epiphany, having one myself, you know, you can have one and not be connected to that nefarious world. And what you also have to understand is much of the atrocity, even though there are so many atrocities that happen connected with the narcotics world, we have learned that crimes of this nature, when there have been murders and massacres and mass killings, a lot of the time, they actually come at the hands of people and their religious beliefs. And one thing that we do know that's happening around Moscow, Idaho, is there seems to be an undertone of other issues and not just narcotics. Now, some people over the last few days have sent me reports and such looking at the police reports, and they break it down into the types of crimes and how many of these crimes were involved in the narcotics or had a narcotics element to them. And it would seem that we don't have the data that would cover the time frame of the Idaho 4 murders. And I believe there was somebody who reported there being a toxicology report actually on the victims of the Idaho 4 case, and there weren't actually any issues of such, that the toxicology tests were all clear. Now, I personally haven't seen that, but I have heard that. So I can't say whether that's right or wrong. And to be fair, I don't even think that would clarify anything. And anyway, I digress. Point being, there is a religious undertone here, and this Doug Wilson and his movement seems to be having, and has been having, especially on Moscow, Idaho. Yeah, he's got some strange ideologies, and you wonder whether there is, and I'm not saying that Doug Wilson has done it, I'm not saying that he's some sort of murderer of sorts, but what I'm saying is, could his beliefs and could the things that he push out into the ether go into a specific type of mind, perhaps a fragile mind of such, and make them believe that they are doing God's work? And to be fair, that would even include the likes of Brian Koberger. You know, we talk about motive, and we had been led to believe or pushed because of this law enforcement mentality. Whenever there's a crime that involves females, generally, they will start at, this is some sort of sex crime of sorts. You know, there'll be some sort of lust angle where someone's fallen for a girl, and you know, that's just the way it is. That's their starting point, and that's unless something knocks them off that course, that's what they stick with. But this other situation, this religious tone, there are things that, and we talk about Dylan Mortensen, for instance. I'll use this as a tip. I'll use words sometimes that have no relevance to the sentence. Makes it all more exciting. So Dylan Mortensen, her family come out recently and said that she was suffering from survivor's guilt. Now, she was also partying that they didn't mention, but for this, we'll ignore that and just talk about this. And that is that she was seeking help from her spiritual community. So there you have one reference to a spiritual community. And so there's a little nod to perhaps some religious element. And what I'm doing, I'm not saying that Dylan Mortensen is part of a religious cult and therefore she could have potentially been involved in the massacre. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is there has to be a motive here. To do this crime, there has to be a motive. 100%. Somebody just doesn't do it for nothing. So there has to be a reason. So who is Doug Wilson? I'll pop these on screen. So burn all the schools, hang all the teachers. Controversial self-appointed pastor in Moscow, Idaho, in his blog post, No Quarter November, October 30th, 2023. So that's who this guy is. We have spoken on this guy before, by the way. If you've been around the channel, this was from Jenny Cohn on Twitter. A nod to her. If you are a Twitter, which is now X, go over and follow. She has some interesting stuff on there. And this is one of hers. This is Doug Wilson's wife, Nancy, describing how she spanked a toddler for not being happy to see her. And there's a little interview snap of her talking about spanking her 3 to 4 year old for not being excited to see her. Burn all the schools. H.L. Mencken once suggested a shrewd educational reform that has somehow not caught on. He said that there was nothing wrong with our current education establishment that could not be fixed by burning all the schools and hanging all the teachers. Now, some might want to dismiss this as an extreme measure, but visionaries are often dismissed in their own day. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. So this is Douglas Wilson sharing an opinion. Another one here, discipline must be painful. The tenderness of parents, particularly of mothers, is a common point of stumbling. This tenderness which refuses to discipline is a kindness which kills. God has required us to inflict pain on those who are dear to us. Douglas Wilson. It goes on, about Doug Wilson's influence on the town of Moscow, Idaho. If you think you are safe from the theocratic assault on America because you live in a blue city, you may want to take a look at what Doug Wilson is doing in Moscow. A Guardian investigation revealed that a controversial church whose leader has openly expressed the ambition of creating a theocracy in America has accumulated significant influence in the city of Moscow. Christchurch has a stated goal to make Moscow a Christian town, and public records, interviews and open source materials online show how its leadership has extended its power and activities in the town. And they are, and I'll put this up here, I've got something else to show you in a second that will shock the shit out of you. Wilson told Christianity Today in 2009, you can't apply scripture woodenly. You might exile some homosexuals depending on the circumstances and the age of the victim. There are circumstances where I'd be in favour of execution for adultery, but I'm not proposing legislation. Wilson's views are pretty out there. He takes some standard right-wing fundamentalist lines, such as arguing that wives should submit to their husbands, but has in the past endorsed harsh forms of biblical law. He told Christianity Today in 2009, you can't apply scripture woodenly, you might exile, and goes on to say what we said there. But check this out. This is a shocker. The last thing I read about the controversial Reformed pastor Doug Wilson, he was making a case for why Christian women are prettier than non-believing females. Excerpt from that. Unbelieving women either compete for the attention of men through outlandish messages. This will be the bit that we have to kind of dumb down a little bit. Up the endeavour entirely, which is how we get lumberjack dykes. The former is an avid reader of Cosmopolitan and thinks she knows 15k ways to please a man in bed. The latter is just plain surely about the fact that there even are any men. So there's that. Apparently, a rhetorical tick among the Moscow Idaho bunch. Longtime readers will recall a younger pastor associated with Wilson's church claiming that Protestants who convert to Catholicism or Orthodoxy are the spiritual equivalent of perverts who masturbate to pornography. He calls himself one of those grenade-launching Protestants. Yeah. This morning, though, a reader brings to my attention a situation in the Moscow circle that is far worse than any culture war sniping and snarking. Earlier this month, a convicted sex offender named Stephen Sittler was prohibited by a judge from having contact with his infant son without a chaperone other than his wife present. This after he was discovered being sexually stimulated by such contact. Sittler was convicted in 2005 of child molestation. He molested several children in a family. Sittler eventually pled guilty to only one count of lewd contact with a child under 16, despite allegations that Sittler had molested other children. None of the other families would cooperate with investigators. Doug Wilson wrote to the judge for leniency and expressing his hope that Sittler could one day be rehabilitated and become a productive member of society. Sittler was sentenced to life in prison but released on probation in 2007 after 20 months behind bars. 6 weeks later, he was caught in the act of voyeurism and confessed to do it. You can read it on screen. I've got it on there. In 2010, an elder at Doug Wilson's church and his family set up a meeting between Katie Travis, a young woman at New Street, St Andrews College in Moscow, and Sittler. Sittler describes it all on the website announcing his and Katie's 2011 wedding. Doug Wilson married them in his church in 2011, this knowing that Sittler was a paedophile. And it goes on, and you can read this. And this is Christchurch, Moscow, Idaho. And look, the point being here is, like I say, you've got some sick people around. Sick people with some sick views. And we're sitting around and we're pondering over the Idaho 4K. So we're talking about cartels and drug cartels being involved in all this. We're trying to scrap around and struggle around and find out why certain people did this. But at the heart of it, you've got a situation where you've got someone who's got a problem with the whole college system. The whole seems to have a massive issue with like modern females and who are empowering themselves and can go out and, you know, look nice. And do you know this whole crime, even though you've got Ethan Chapin here, Ethan Chapin to me was the odd one out. He was there. He was just there because his partner was Xana and he just happened to stay over that night. And he was the unlucky. He was the odd one out in my eyes. When you look at the bigger picture of it all, This was females. This was females who had been out that night. The 3 females who had been out and had gone back home, gone into that house, and someone went in there and butchered them. And it does make you wonder whether the real motive behind all this is someone who had an utter hatred for that type of female. That type of person. And that is a religious issue, a religious belief. And as much as people can be religious and be amazing people, they can follow God and follow everything and be truly amazing. The flip side of that coin is like everything. There are people who are poisonous to the core and turn religion and turn anything into a weapon and people into weapons through that belief construct. And I wonder whether that is what we're looking at here. We're looking at the well, let me know down below. You know what I'm getting at. This ain't cult. This is not cartel. This is cult. I'll see you all in the next one.